Shaun Haney and Justin Funk here with RealAgristudies, and boy, are we excited about presenting to you the results of the April 2024 Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. We last did this in January. Now we've got the April data. It'll be very interesting to see how things are shaking out. There's been a lot of concern in farm country, gave a lot of speeches through the winter, talking about some of the negativity that was out there, and in many parts for good reason. And now we'll get a chance to look at things, how farmers feel about the environment financially, and about a bunch of other stuff as we head out to the field to put some seed in the ground. Calves are dropping. There's a lot happening here in the spring. So, Justin, well, we should point out that this is the high-level results, and over the next number of weeks, we're going to be digging deeper into some of the demographics and presenting some of that data as well in terms of how farmers felt. But today, we're just going through the high-level stuff, so let's get to it.
Yeah, you bet. So, for some of you, this may have been the first time you completed the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. So just if it is, the purpose of this study is to gauge sentiment, not just now, but over a period of time on a number of issues that are important to farmers. So we take a look at the current financial performance of the farm, the future financial performance, outlook on the ag economy. We've looked at questions related to the government, grain markets, and the ever important state of mental health. And so we try to ask the same questions the same way every time so we can look at things from period to period and also over a longer period of time. In this iteration, so we've now moved from every other month to a quarterly survey. We had 538 of you complete this survey. So thank you very much for your continued engagement. Because of that, we can interpret these results within plus or minus 5% degree of accuracy. So we can say that this is representative of farmers in Canada. Now, in this iteration of the study, we decided, because we are always asking you about things that are pretty serious, and rightfully so, important stuff, we decided to lighten it up a little bit and ask some funner questions. And so here, because we are pretty much right on the cusp of the Stanley Cup playoffs, so the first round is just concluded, we ask some questions about that. So, Shaun, we asked our panel, are you watching any of the Stanley Cup playoffs? And what we found is that roughly 60% of farmers are, 17% maybe, but nearly a quarter said no. And we put an article up on RealAgriculture just this past weekend, and it was really interesting to see who isn't watching. And as you would imagine, it's people who cheer for teams that aren't in the playoffs, but surprisingly, a lot of Toronto Maple Leafs fans too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anyway, I don't want to hit on a
I'm one of
sensitive
those.
subject.
Yeah, I'm one of those people as a Flames fan, but I have watched some games, so I would be in the yes category. It'd be interesting to do this sometime and ask about curling. See how many we're watching curling. A lot of ag companies advertised curling. I would like to know how many are actually watching that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, maybe in one of our
Yeah,
future surveys, we'll take a look.
we shall.
So we asked people, who are you cheering for? And so this is largely representative of our audience from a geographical standpoint. But as you can see, Edmonton is the clear-cut favorite here with nearly a third of our panelists cheering for Edmonton, 20% with Winnipeg and 18% with the Leafs. Now, of course, a lot of these, well, I think all the first round has been decided now. So we're going to have some disappointed panelists here. But Edmonton, I mean, here we go. A third of them going to be, I think, relatively pleased. Now, Shaun, this is who do you want to win? We also ask, who are you cheering against? Now, this was interesting. I mean, so clearly here, Toronto is the antagonist, followed by Boston, and then Vegas. There's, a lot of neutrality, really, when it comes to some of these other Canadian teams. So I'm not sure what to think of that. As somebody who's here in Ontario, I mean, not too far from Toronto, I'm admittedly not a hockey fan, so I don't really have a horse in the race. I don't know. What do you think of this?
Oh, poor Leafs. They're out. That's like, but it'll make 20% of our audience very, very happy. So there is that. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to see Vegas so high because they're kind of a new team. I think people just think they've been too successful, right?
Yeah.
They had a really good expansion draft and they were it was loaded for them to succeed. And then they've done the thing with Mark Stone where he's hurt and then they're able to open up the cap. So I think people are getting a little bit tired of it. So they're out. Dallas won. So we'll have some happy campers there as well.
So we ask another question. This is who you're cheering for to win the cup. Now, if not everybody's team is in the playoffs, so we ask who's your favorite NHL team. So here we got about a quarter of our panelists are Edmonton fans, 20% are Toronto fans, then Winnipeg and Calgary. So no surprise here, Canadian representation, and then you got a spattering of other teams. It could be 5, 6 fans, based on our sample size, and 12% don't have a team. So this kind of shows you where people's overall rooting interests are. But the cool thing about this is now this is when we get kind of nifty with the data. We took a look at who's your favorite team overall, but then who don't you want to win the cup? And there was an interesting trend line that developed here. So this is a little messy. If you look down the left-hand side, these are fans of the team, and then on the other side, it's what team you don't want to win in the playoffs. And this is just showing you here. Now, I want you to pay attention here to this olive green line. So let's interpret this. If you're a Boston Bruins fan, 43% of you don't want Florida to win. 43% of you don't want Toronto to win. Well, you got your wish with Toronto. Now you got to deal with Florida. Okay, but then you take a look. Calgary, 28% of them don't want Edmonton to win. 15% don't want Toronto. Let's go down to Toronto. If you're Toronto, you don't want Boston to win. Well, you can still hope for that. But here's the thing. I'm just highlighting here Toronto. It is very, very decisive that regardless of what team you cheer for, there is a great likelihood that you don't want Toronto to win. And that is amplified if you are a fan of a Canadian team. So
Yeah.
it's like you're okay. If you're a Canadian team fan, you're okay with just about anybody else winning the cup other than you, as long as it's not the Maple Leafs. So anyway, I just thought that was really interesting to dig into that data and look at that.
Message, yeah, message received. Poor Kelvin Hepner. He's a fan of the Leafs. He just can't win. So, okay,
All
let's
right.
let's move on and look at the Canadian
Okay,
farmers.
sounds good. Task at hand. Okay, Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. If this is the very first time you've taken the survey and seen these results, just a quick explanation of how we get to these numbers. These are real results you're going to look at. Very first question we asked you on the index was, would you say that your operation is financially better off, worse off, or about the same today as it was a year ago? And so here's the results. 19.1% said better off. 34.4% said worse off, and then 46.3 said about the same. So how we calculate the index is we take the positive response, which in this case is 19.1%, minus the negative, which is 34.4%, to now get a negative 15.3 differential. We add 100 to it, that gives us our index. So in this case, the index number for current farm financial performance is negative 84.7. Okay, so looking at that, we then plot it on this table, which shows the neutral, which is 100. Okay, so anything above 100 is a positive sentiment, anything below is negative. All right, so in looking at now current farm financial performance, what I'm going to show you is all the results from September of 2022, which is the very first time we did this survey. So you can kind of see things went up and then they kind of went down, almost like a roller coaster. Well, here we are in April of 2024 at 85. So what that essentially means is pretty much no change from January.
Okay. So people
Okay.
feeling static
Yep.
from April to January
Yeah.
in regards to their current farm financial performance.
Correct. Now, we've asked this question on occasion. We don't ask it every time, but we thought we would ask if you said worse off, why? So you only got this next question if you answered worse off. And so here are the results. So we had a primary reason and a secondary reason. So the primary reason, I mean, very, very clear. It's commodity prices followed by input prices and then cost of borrowing and weather, etc. The secondary reason, again, you can see commodity prices are there, but input prices and cost of borrowing and weather and equipment prices. So this is kind of what's on the mind of the farmer now. If you're saying we're worse off than we were 12 months ago, these are some of the reasons why.
So nobody put cost of labor as their primary reason, is how I'm reading that?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So going back to now future farm financial performance, these are the results from all the previous studies we've done. And again, you can see, if you look in the difference between October of 2023 to January of 24, there was a very, very steep decline. Well, we rebounded here, pretty much almost right back up to where we were in October. And so we point out that increase, but really over that extended period of time, there's been very little change in that particular number. But still, you'll note that it's negative, and it's always been negative.
Yeah, and this is the first time that future farm financial performance has been higher than current farm financial performance.
Yeah, great, good observation. Yep.
First time. Remember they were converging. We talked about this in January. They're converging. You can see my little sideways diagonal thing you're watching the YouTube video. And then they rolled over in January, but now future is higher. That's interesting.
Yeah. Now, again, we ask why. So if you said we feel we're going to be worse off, we wanted to know why. So we asked that question. And the same options were given here. Again, commodity prices, but now you see cost of borrowing jumping up there, followed by input prices and weather. For secondary reason, input prices. People are still concerned about input prices, but more as a secondary than as opposed to a primary.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to when we get to the outlook on the markets to see what people think about that, with both for current farm financial performance and future farm financial performance, commodity prices being the number one reason that they think things are going to be worse off. When we didn't ask for the people that said better off, why? I'm thinking that, well, I'm curious as to what the reasons why would be. People may choose commodity prices because they have lifted a little bit from where they were at some of the lows. So it's fascinating.
Yeah. Um, we also ask a question this time about land rental agreements. Now, this is not an area that I'm, much of an expert in, but we asked, are you planning on renewing any land rental agreements? And so you can see here, 55% are, 34% said no, and then some are a little uncertain. But for those that said yes, so that 55% now got taken to another question. We asked, what do you expect to happen to the price of your land rent? And here we saw that 53% of them said that it's likely going to increase. So again, we got another branch off that question. We asked, well, by how much? So we gave some broad categories here, but anywhere between 1 and 24%, 25 and 50%. We actually had a greater than 50%. Nobody selected that one, but you can see here between 1 and 24%. So, according to our panelists, land rent is going up potentially by a significant margin.
Yeah, well, but land values have also gone up, right? So actually, Farm Credit Canada just put out an analysis of that, looking at cash rent values relative to land values and having a ratio as a percentage. And so this falls very much in line with what they were talking about is happening.
So going back to the index, we then shift attention to the ag economy and the ag industry. And so we ask people to rate their relative optimism towards the ag economy. Do you think the ag economy is going to be better off in 12 months or worse off in 12 months? And as you can see here, this is from October to January, huge drop off. But again, we see a bit of a rebound. Now, not quite back up to where we were in 2023, but still, it's a positive increase here relative to where we were in January. Now, just very quickly, this is the 12-month. Now we look at the ag industry in the next 5 years, and you can see very similar trend line that we saw with the more of the current situation. Again, a major drop off from October to January, and we saw now a rebound on that one. So, looking at this, Shaun, I know when we talked about this in January, we were kind of a little concerned. There was definitely a lot of drop off happening, but we're starting to see things rebound more to the average, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, well, and it shows you that the future farm financial performance and the optimism towards the Canadian economy, both 12-month questions, both tracking up. So that makes sense. And I agree. When we looked at, if you look at future of Canadian ag industry, good times or bad times, that's 5 years. That's a long time. At 56, at a 200 in January, boy, it felt like we were really being negative. But to come back to 81, I think we're working our way a little bit closer to more where the traditional number has been since we started doing this in September of 22. And it'd be great to be in a situation where we see that get above the neutral line. I know we can do it, and hopefully that's what we see here at some point in 24.
Well, one of the indicators that I was really pleased with was in this next one. We've been asking about is now a good time or not a good time to be making investments in the farm, which included things like buying land, buying equipment, and things like that. And as you can see, there was this drop off at the very beginning, and then things kind of hovered in around anywhere between that 50 and 54 mark, right? Like we noted very little change. In this last iteration of the study, though, we saw this one bounce back up. Now,
Hmm.
this is marginal, and I understand that, but consider this is over 538 different responses that came in. So for this to be hovering at that average of, let's say 52, pretty much every time we've done the study, to now take a jump up, to me that maybe that signals something. And so again, we're still very negative on this one, but for it to start trending up, maybe, I mean, it's too early to say it's a trend, but for it to tick up this time around, I think is encouraging because maybe people are reconciling with the fact, hey, this is how things are. Maybe now we need to say it's time to start, making those investments. Can't wait
Yeah, and
anymore.
if you look at the reasons for people being negative about their future farm financial performance, cost of borrowing was the second answer, right? So between now and the next Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index, which would be in July, there is a June meeting by the Bank of Canada. We'll see if they do drop rates, and if that is a bit of a catalyst for this number to even go higher, at least the beginning of a trend higher, based on that, easement a little bit of cost of borrowing. There's a long ways to go before we're back to where we were from an interest rate perspective, but that may be the first sign that things are lightening up.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to September of 22, the very first time we did the study, shortly thereafter, there was an interest rate announcement where that was sort of the first time they started to really go up, and we saw that drop off. So there was a response after that announcement. So stand to reason it would maybe respond the other way if rates went the other way.
Makes sense.
So the next category here focuses on marketing. And so we ask about confidence. So this is more of a personal reflection, like how confident are you in marketing your crops? And you can see this one really started to trend down. Then it bounced up a little bit. I guess that would be in the summer, between the summer and fall of 23. And then it dropped off again in January of 24. We're starting to tick up maybe a little bit, still not back up to October 23 numbers, but there is a little bit of a rebound happening here. And just to look at the next one, which is the outlook on selling crops, where we essentially ask, and this is a very general question, but if you had to, would you hold because prices are going up, or should you sell because prices are going down? We see here this one was really starting to trend down, again, really roller coastery. But when we look in April now, it's back up to where we were in October numbers. Just very quickly, we ask if you have livestock. And so we do the same thing now related to livestock. Confidence in marketing livestock has traditionally always been higher. It's at 129, so very, very positive. And then we ask also outlook for livestock margins even higher yet. I mean, almost as high as you can possibly be at a 173, considering 200 is the upper limit on this.
Yeah, well, it's about time livestock had a turn at some profits. So yeah, the volatility in outlook on selling crops continues. So when we get to July, I don't know it's sort of a 50-50 gamble on whether it's going to be above 100 or below 100 based on what has happened here over the past number of months. I am glad to see that confidence in marketing crops it has ticked higher. That's the important one in my mind, because whether the market's going up or the market's going down, it's having confidence in that marketing plan that's really going to separate yourself from the rest of your peers from profitability standpoint. So yeah, and listen, the markets have really, really bounced around. So this is what we've seen in the charts is very similar to what we see here.
So the final category that we look at here is state of mental health. And I'm pleased to report that this one has remained relatively unchanged over the past little while. In fact, we saw a slight increase in this latest study that we did. But the overall trend here is it's remained relatively flat, which is not a bad thing at all. And really hovering around that 100 is not a bad thing at all. In general, people are indicating that their mental health is about the same. And in One instance, I know we've had some comments here, but one stands out in particular. My mental health remains unchanged, but it started at a pretty good spot. And so, it's not that it's better off, but it's about the same, and that's okay. And I think that that person is absolutely right. So, you know what? This is an important thing for us to measure. I'm really glad, though, to see that for all intents and purposes, it remains pretty much about the same.
Yeah, and you, you continue to see the detachment from mental health and say profitability, right? Like although we have done some of those comparisons before, even though the market is bounced all over the place, people have kept an even keel when it comes to the rating on mental health, which I think is a which is means a lot of the efforts of the industry is really proving itself out, and I think it's real positive.
Yeah. So, Shaun, that is the April 2024 Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index.
Yeah, and remind everybody, we're going to be going through some of the demographics over the next number of weeks, so please stay tuned for that. Justin and I are going to write a number of different articles. There's lots of interesting stuff here as we dive into the demographics for sure. You can see the difference between grain and livestock for sure. We definitely one of the ones we'll be picking on. Indeed, really do appreciate everybody filling out the survey. Please continue to do so. It is so helpful in making sure that the industry and stakeholders better understand what's happening in the farmer's head in terms of how you're looking at things. So this is critical work, and your participation, it doesn't happen without it. So really do appreciate it. If you want to find out more, go to realagristudies.com. If you have any feedback, questions, comments, are you looking at this data any different than we are? We'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. On behalf of myself and Justin Funk of Real Agri Studies, cheers, everybody. Happy seeding and planting.